Hi everyone, I'm Shelly and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. I'm back with another video and today's topic is the mark of the beast already happened. This is actually a topic that I have been asked about multiple times and I have never devoted a video to it as of yet, until right now. I have talked about it in comments and I might have mentioned it in other videos, but I'm going to focus solely on this right now, and here's why. I received a comment, I think it was last week, and the commenter said, "You're so off the road with this. Of course, I have shared my thoughts on where your errors are, and I wasn't going to try and sway you anymore by commenting. I was thinking to myself, what harm is she doing? I told myself to leave you be. Then tonight it dawned on me that you may cause people to take the mark of the beast. That is tragic. Praying for everyone to discernment. God bless." Okay, I am sorry, but that mentality is driven by fear mongering. And what this commenter might not even realize that she is doing, but what she is doing is she is trying to scare me into not believing what the Bible actually says. So today I'm actually going to double down on what I have already been saying because the Bible explicitly makes it clear that all of these things were going to happen soon in the first century. In fact, the book of Revelation is bookended with Jesus saying that he is coming soon. Revelation 1 and Revelation 22. And it also says it in the middle of Revelation 2, I believe possibly Revelation 3, it says it. I believe what Jesus says. I know that the church has been teaching that these things have not happened. But if it comes down to believing the Bible over man, I'm going to believe the Bible every single time. So today I'm going to get into what could possibly have been the mark of the beast in the first century, because yes, I believe that all prophecy was fulfilled by AD 70. And why do I believe that? Because Jesus said soon. He also said that this generation shall not pass away until all these things take place. And he's talking about the things that happened that he was referring to in the Olivet Discourse. He also said in Matthew 16:28, some of you standing here shall not taste death until you see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. And guess what? That happens after the mark of the beast. So by default, the mark of the beast also had to have happened before Jesus's generation was done. Before we actually get into that, though, I really did want to focus just for a few minutes on where this mentality comes from, that everything that is happening in the world right now is directly out of Revelation. Because as I have mentioned on my channel before, this is not something that is exclusive to our generation. Every generation claims to be that terminal generation, or that generation that all these things are going to happen to. The generation that Jesus was actually talking to in Matthew 24:34, and not to the people that he was sitting there speaking to. So Gary DeMar, he actually has some really good stuff. And now he is a partial preterist. He actually is, he's very, a lot of the partial preterists kind of treat full preterists like pariahs, but Gary DeMar does not do that. So I just want to give a shout out to him for that. Thank you for not treating us like that and for understanding why we believe what we believe. Now, one thing that Gary DeMar has talked about is generational provincialism. And that is one of the reasons that so many people, not even just so many people today, but so many people over time have always believed that everything is going to be happening to them. Much of the speculative nature of today's Bible prophecy hysteria can be linked to generational provincialism. That is, the belief that nothing has prophetic significance unless it happens to the present generation. Many who take this approach seem to be unaware that wars, earthquakes, famines, and plagues have been a part of the human condition since the fall. At various crucial periods in human history, God has used these phenomena as warnings of impending judgment or as retribution for covenantal unfaithfulness. Of course, not every earthquake or famine has such a meaning. Each occurrence, however, ought to serve as a reminder that we are sinners and our world has been ravaged by the effects of rebellion. So that is the first thing I wanted to bring up, is this generational provincialism, because it perfectly says why every generation always thinks that they're the one. This spells it out. The next thing that he talked about, and I will have both of these articles linked in the description box below, is something called newspaper exegesis. And again, this one is also written by Gary DeMar at the American Vision. What is newspaper exegesis? The practice of interpreting the Bible through the lens of current events found in the headlines of newspapers, rather than allowing the Bible to interpret itself and failing to take into account when prophetic events were to take place and to whom. It's a form of retroactive prophetic explanation where current events are used as an interpretive grid for understanding the Bible. For example, in The Coming Islamic Invasion of Israel, prophecy writer Mark Hitchcock claims that Ezekiel is God's war correspondent for today's newspapers. We have gone through his inspired prophecy in Ezekiel 38 to 39 with our Bibles in one hand and today's newspaper in the other. Can this method be true when prophecy writers from the past have used the news of their day to assure the readers of their day that they had the right interpretation of Ezekiel 38 and 39? The following chart shows how newspaper exegesis can and does go wrong. And I don't even see the chart that he's talking about, but that's okay because I have the rest of this linked. So we have generational provincialism, and then we have newspaper exegesis are the reason that there are so many people today just scouring the headlines, trying to find out where it is that we are in Revelation instead of believing what Jesus said in the beginning and end of Revelation, that all of these things were going to be happening soon. Okay, so now let's get into the mark of the beast. I need to point out that when futurists speculate on the mark of the beast and they get it wrong, no one bats an eye. Yet preterists are expected to be perfectly accurate. And I've heard that so many times. Well, why don't you know what it was? Well, my question to you is, why are there so many futurist prophecy pundits who are claiming that they know what the mark of the beast is going to be and they end up being wrong? Why do they get left off the hook? Full preterism or covenant eschatology is something that has been swept under the rug. And so, yes, we haven't had as many people scouring the history books or the Bible for covenant eschatology. Yet, I am going to be sharing two really fantastic possibilities for what it is, particularly the second one. So make sure you stick around to the end of this video, because the second one is the one that I really think fits the Bible very, very well. Let's just first go over some of the failed futurist mark of the beast theories. So far, they have said that it is going to be a barcode tattoo. Some of them have said that it is an implant. When people in Europe were getting microchips implanted into their hand, everyone was freaking out, saying that is the mark of the beast because the microchip it linked them to their bank account. And yeah, I'm one of those people that at the time I was like, I will never do that in case that's the mark of the beast. I was still of that mindset that it was still something in the future. And, even now, I wouldn't want something like that in my hand to begin with. And I surely, and I'm going to point this out for the commenter, I would surely never encourage anyone to do any of these things. I would never encourage anyone to get a barcode tattooed on their forehead or their hand. I would never encourage to have someone get a microchip. This is another one of the possibilities. We hear this. I think this is the most popular one right now, is what I'm going to call the jabs. Now, even before the 2020 incident, I'll call it, People were already saying at that time that jabs were the mark of the beast. And then when 2020 happened, they just ramped it up even more. And they said that it was specifically that one, especially when it was discovered that there was something in there called luciferase, which has the word Lucifer in it, which, yes, that's mighty shady, but this is not the mark of the beast. Another one that I have heard, and again, I also have to say, I don't do these either. My children don't get these, so this is not something that I'm going to push on anyone either. Same thing here. People have said that it's the passport because you wouldn't be able to travel without it. And guess what? That never happened. So many of the things that happened during the 2020 event, some of the things happened, a lot of them did not, though. Everyone always says, oh, the conspiracy theorists are always right. Sometimes they're right. They're not always right. This is one of those things that they were not right about. And no, this is not the mark of the beast either. And here's another really interesting one. I have heard people say that your social security number is the mark of the beast and that you should not get one for your children because then they have been marked with the mark of the beast. Well, you know, what would be interesting about that is that then it would be confined only to the United States because it is only in the United States where we actually have social security cards. So, and I don't recall the United States ever being mentioned in the Bible. The first possibility for the mark of the beast, this is actually on the website Revelations in Grace by John Paul Miles. And I actually will be doing an online book club. It's right here on my channel for his second edition of his book, On Time, Reexamining the End Times and Jesus' Return. So if you want to go through that with me, I'm going to be posting the video for chapter 1 later on this week. And I'll put hashtag on time so that you know specifically what I'm talking about. But he is the author of this book. It flipped over. I don't know why. Well, that's okay. I'll see on time. So, the mark of the beast. In Revelation 13:16, the land beast compels all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead. It says right here in Revelation 13:16, he causes all, the small and the great, the rich and the poor, and the free and the slave, to be given marks on their right hands or on their foreheads. The mark of Revelation 13:16 had both a spiritual and physical component. Spiritually, it signifies loyalty to Rome and allegiance to the beast. On the other hand, the physical component of the mark is represented by the Roman coins and deeds with Caesar's image that the Jews were forced to use for buying and selling. I'm just going to interject here that I haven't been able to find a source that says that they were forced to use these coins, but it could just be something that was overlooked. So I have to put that out there because this is, we want the truth, okay? The mark became a symbol of compliance and participation in the Roman system. The number 666 associated with the mark is believed to be linked to the figures Nero, Vespasian, and Titus, as well as to the Jewish entity represented by the 10 horns of the sea beast. Overall, the mark of the beast represents the imposition of Roman authority and the challenges faced by those who refuse to comply. You will see some stark differences between this view and the second view that I am going to share with you. Next, those loyal to Rome were spiritually branded with the beast's mark. The spiritual mark proved whom one belonged to or whom one served. And in Exodus, it says, "For when Pharaoh stubbornly refused to let us go, the Lord killed all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both the firstborn of man and the firstborn of animals. Therefore, I sacrifice to the Lord all the males that first opened the womb, but all the firstborn of my sons," now I should have opened it up before I started reading it, "I redeem. It shall be as a mark on your hands or frontlets between your eyes." That would be your forehead, correct? "For by a strong hand the Lord brought us out of Egypt." In Ezekiel, those who sighed and groaned over the abominations committed in Jerusalem were spiritually marked. Ezekiel 9, 3-6. Now the glory of the God of Israel had gone up from the cherub on which it rested to the threshold of the house. And he called to the man clothed in linen, who had the writing case at his waist. And the Lord said to him, Pass through the city, through Jerusalem, and put a mark on the foreheads of the men who sigh and groan over all the abominations that are committed in it. And to the others he said in my hearing, Pass through the city after him and strike. Your eye shall not spare, and you shall show no pity. Kill old men outright, young men and maidens, little children and women, but touch no one on whom is the mark, and begin at my sanctuary. So they began with the elders who were before the house. The 144,000 saints loyal to God were spiritually marked on their foreheads. And do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, by whom you were sealed for the day of redemption. Revelation 7:3. Do not harm the earth or the sea or the trees until we have sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads. Then I looked, and behold, on Mount Zion stood the Lamb, and with him 144,000, who had his name and his Father's name written on their foreheads. Christian Jews would naturally contrast receiving the mark of the beast on their right hands or on their foreheads with failing to keep God's laws and their testimony about Christ in their thoughts or their deeds. In Deuteronomy 6, 4-8, and again, I will leave a link in the description for anyone who wants to go through all of these. In Deuteronomy 6, 4-8, God illustrated the importance of remembering and obeying his commands by instructing them to make his words and commandments a sign on their hand and frontlets between their eyes. He did not intend for Jews to literally walk around with the Mosaic law written on their hands and between their eyes. In Deuteronomy 6, 4-8, Hear Israel, Yahweh is our God, Yahweh is one. You shall love Yahweh your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. These words which I command you today shall be on your heart, and you shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them for a sign on your hand, and they shall be for frontlets between your eyes. Down here, it gets into the physical mark. The physical component of the mark was the Roman coins and deeds with Caesar's image that the Romans forced the Jews to use if they wanted to buy and sell. So again, I have not seen any sources for this. I may have missed them though, but I cannot find anything saying that they were forced to use them. Revelation 13:17, and that no one would be able to buy or to sell unless he has that mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of his name. Before the start of the war in 66 AD, the Jews minted their own coins without graven images on them. The second commandment in the Mosaic law forbade the Jews from bowing down, serving, or creating carved images in the likeness of anything in the heavens, earth, or waters. The depiction of Caesar on Roman coins posed a direct violation of the second commandment. Moraes, and he's referring to the author of RevelationRevolution.com, Daniel Moraes, describes one of the coins the Romans forced the Jews to use after the fall of Jerusalem in 70 AD. After the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70, all Jews who remained in Judea, Jerusalem, and the rest of Israel, in addition to those who were exiled throughout Rome, were forced to use Roman money marked with the name and image of the beast. Thus, after the fall of Jerusalem, it would have been impossible to buy or sell anywhere in the Roman Empire without the mark of the beast. Thus, it is interesting to note that a coin issued in AD 72 is marked with the following legend around Vespasian's head. Now, I also do want to say that this has me also thinking, because it happened after the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. And if you read Daniel 12, verse 7, it says that all would be completed at the shattering of the power of God's holy people, which I take to mean the shattering or the destruction of the temple, because they were no longer able to continue doing all of the requirements of the law. Okay, so I do have a hard time with this because it is past AD 70. I believe that everything was fulfilled by AD 70. But then it does say when people worshiped Nero, they received a certificate or mark of approval, charagma, the same word used in Revelation 13:16. And then it says, all those under the jurisdiction of Rome were required by law to publicly proclaim their allegiance to Caesar by burning a pinch of incense and declaring Caesar as Lord. Upon compliance with this law, the people were given a papyrus document called a libellus, which they were required to present when either stopped by the Roman police or attempting to engage in commerce in the Roman marketplace, increasing the difficulty of buying or selling without this mark. And so this is not something that I have looked into, but that is before AD 70. And so the meaning of 666 is, very similar to what a lot of people believe, is that it does have something to do with Nero. So the sum of each letter of the Hebrew spelling of Nero Caesar adds up to 666. And it also says that Nero's constituents also called him a beast, which is very interesting. Now, he also does talk about a possible Jewish 666 because King Solomon was said to collect 666 talents of gold per year, and that Solomon built the temple where those rejecting Jesus continue to worship. Such a view would be consistent with the idea that symbols in Revelation sometimes describe more than one thing. So this is all a great possibility. I know that a lot of people believe that this was actually the mark of the beast, is referring to the spiritual aspect with the ties back to the Old Testament, and then the physical aspect with the coins, which again, I'm a little iffy on that. And then the document, the charagma, I'm probably saying it wrong. Now, the next possibility that I want to go over with you, I was blown away the first time that I read this. And it was actually written by Kristen from Heretic Chick Chat. And she has a great channel, and I highly recommend that you go over there and watch some of her videos and subscribe. But she wrote like a 4.5-page exegetical analysis of the mark of the beast. And she gave me permission to share some of it, and that's exactly what I'm going to do today. I'm really thankful. I've had the privilege to just have some chats with her recently, some conversations, and they're always so fruitful. And like I said, she's a very sharp lady. So I really appreciate the time she spent to answer any questions that I have. So one of the things that she says is, if we have learned anything from coming to fulfilled eschatology, isn't it that the Old Testament is the key to understanding the New? And that is really what I like about this analysis that she has here, is because it is exegetical. She took this completely out of Scripture, and she has not gone into history to explain any of these things or into historical accounts. This is strictly out of the Bible. Now, she does go over the same verses that John Paul Miles used. And she says, let us make some observations from the text. First, the beast causes all people to receive its mark on their right hand or forehead. What if we attempt to put ourselves into the mind of a first-century Jew? What do you think would come to mind for someone who was steeped in the Torah since childhood? Let us compare Revelation 13, which says, and I'm just adding this in here, also it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is the name of the beast or the number of its name. What do you think would come to mind for someone who was steeped in the Torah since childhood? I might have already read that, but that's okay. Let us compare Revelation 13 with Deuteronomy 6:8. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes, which is forehead. Again, in Deuteronomy 11:18, it says, you shall therefore lay up these words of mine in your heart and in your soul, and you shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. So here we see that the Old Covenant law itself was to be on the Israelites' hands and foreheads. Is it completely unrelated that the beast has his mark in these same locations? So as you can see, both John Paul Miles and Kristen, they start out from the same place. They start out from Deuteronomy 6, 4-8, but they end up going into different places. Then she shared another example, Exodus 28, verses 36-38. You shall make a plate of pure gold and engrave on it, like the engraving of a signet, holy to the Lord. And you shall fasten it on the turban by a cord of blue. It shall be on the front of the turban. It shall be on Aaron's forehead, and Aaron shall bear any guilt from the holy things that the people of Israel consecrate as their holy gifts. It shall regularly be on his forehead, that they may be accepted before the Lord. So it's certainly feasible that when the Old Covenant Jews would have been reading this, or not even, the Old Covenant Jews, but also those who became believers, when they would have read this, that surely seems to be a possibility of what they would have been thinking of. And it's also important to remember that in Revelation 13:18, we see that the number of the beast is the number of a man. And what Kristen writes here is the Greek word here translated as a man is anthropou. I probably said that wrong. And it says this word can be translated as man or mankind. So 666 is a man or mankind. So next, we're just going to go into the 144,000. Next, she heads into Revelation 14, and she does say to keep it in mind that 666 is translated as a man or mankind. Okay. So now in Revelation 14, she says, here we have another special number, the 144,000. Just like the followers of the beast, this group also has something written on their foreheads. Revelation 14:1 reads, Then I looked, and behold, on Mount Zion stood the Lamb, and with him 144,000 who had his name and his father's name written on their foreheads. She goes on to say, what an amazing picture John is painting for us. We have the beast and his followers with his mark on their hands or foreheads, standing in contrast to the Lamb and his followers with the Lamb's name and the Father's name on their foreheads. But who are these 144,000? Verse 4 gives us some incredible insight. Revelation 14:4. It is these who have not defiled themselves with women, for they are virgins. It is these who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These have been redeemed from mankind as firstfruits for God and the Lamb. Then she says the 144,000 have been redeemed from mankind. Remember that Greek word anthropou from chapter 13? The mark of the beast, his number, is the number of anthropou. Well, here it is again in chapter 14. The 144,000 are redeemed from anthropou. They are redeemed from the beast. They are redeemed from 666. What does this mean? So then in Revelation 7, we learn more about the sea beast and the 144,000. And starting in verse 3, it says, Do not harm the earth or the sea or the trees until we have sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads. And I heard the number of the sealed, 144,000, sealed from every tribe of the sons of Israel. So now again, what we see is that the 144,000 are sealed on their foreheads. This is the mark of chapter 14. But as Kristen pointed out, they're sealed from the tribes of Israel. The Greek word here translated as from is ex, meaning out of. The 144,000 are sealed from out of Israel. But remember, the 144,000 are redeemed from or out of the anthropou, which is the mark of the beast. Continuing on, and I would love to just give a summary of this, but this is so well written that a summary it's just not going to do this justice. So I'm just going to read what she wrote. I'm not reading the entire paper to you, but I'm reading you a good portion of it because this is just, it's so well researched. Anyway, but the 144,000 are from or out of the tribes of Israel. And that's what we just read in Revelation 7. Therefore, the beast and his mark represent Israel, specifically Old Covenant Israel. The imagery used to describe the beast is straight out of the Old Testament and is a description of Israel under the Old Covenant. Revelation chapters 13 and 14 portray a stark contrast between two groups of people. One group bears the mark of the beast, the Old Covenant. The other group comes out from this first beastly group and now bears the mark of the Savior. Do you wonder why the followers of the beast have a mark on their hands and on the heads, while the 144,000 only have the mark on their heads? She said, well, I did, and I did too as I was reading this. I kept thinking to myself, but it doesn't say hand. Well, she explains this very well. Think back to the passages from Deuteronomy and Exodus. Notice that the people of Israel were to bind the words of the law on their hands and their foreheads. And the Jews of today, they still do this. So there it's bound to their hand and their forehead. If you take notice, though, and this is just me paraphrasing, in Exodus 28, 36 to 38, which we did read before, this only mentions it on the priest's forehead. And you shall fasten it on the turban by a cord of blue. It shall be on the front of the turban. It shall be on Aaron's forehead, and Aaron shall bear any guilt from the holy things that the people of Israel consecrate as their holy gifts. It shall regularly be on his forehead, that they may be accepted before the Lord. So when it comes to the priest, it was only on the forehead. And then Kristen made a very interesting observation. She said, could it be that hands represent work, and specifically works of the Old Covenant? Acts 17:24. The God who made the world and everything in it, being Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in temples made by man. Now, if you actually look at some of the other translations, it says he does not live in temples built by human hands. Made by human hands, handmade temples, made with hands. Then we have Ephesians 2:11. Therefore, remember that at one time you Gentiles in the flesh, called the uncircumcision by what is called the circumcision, which is made in the flesh by hands. So it's contrasting between things that are made by hands, such as the physical temple and the physical circumcision being made with hands, versus the spiritual circumcision and the spiritual temple. Next, she says, hands are a symbol of man's attempt to reach God through works of the law. Contrast this with the high priest, who has only holy to the Lord on his forehead. And who are we as believers? Think about that. Didn't have this set up now, but I'm going to show it to you. 1 Peter 2:9. But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. She made a really astute observation here. It is the priests who were only sealed on the forehead. And it was in the Old Covenant law where they were sealed on both the forehead and the hand. And as she pointed out, hands are symbolic of works. There is no more work or hands in the new covenant of Christ, just a priesthood of believers saved by the Lamb. So now let's talk a little bit about the sea beast of Revelation, because it does tie in with 666. And instead of using gematria, like most people use when it comes to interpreting 666, that's how they come up with it, meaning Nero. Kristen, she also keeps it strictly to the Bible, and she talks about the same example that John Paul Miles gave about King Solomon and him requiring 666 talents of gold from his citizens from his kingdom. She says, the number of the beast, 666, occurs in the Old Testament in reference to the number of talents of gold Solomon received yearly. Keep in mind, God had commanded the Israelites concerning their future king that he must not acquire excess gold or horses or wives for himself. Clearly, Solomon's 666 talents of gold was a testament to Israel's complete failure to keep God's commandment regarding their king. Remember that Samuel warned the Israelites of what laid in store for them due to their demand for a king. He warned them that they would become slaves under their king and would cry out to God, but he would not answer them. That's from 1 Samuel 8:10-18. The Jews of Jesus' day did not understand that they were slaves. When talking with Jesus in John 8:33, they state, "We are offspring of Abraham and have never been enslaved to anyone." Jesus answered them, "Everyone who practices sin is a slave to sin." Then she says, my point is this: just as Solomon was a king of Israel and enslaved his own people, collecting 666 talents of gold annually, the Jews of the first century were slaves to sin. 1 Corinthians 15:56. The sting of death is sin, and the power of sin is the law. The law made slaves of those under the old covenant. These are Kristen's words. Just like Solomon made slaves of the Israelites. Could it be that 666 represents deserting God and being enslaved by your own system? I think that's a good question. And I think one thing that I really want to point out in this video, which it's 36 minutes in, it's a little too late, but remember, these are two possibilities. I am not saying that either one of these is 100% true. Okay, like so many of the futurists who are absolutely certain that, there are barcodes or microchips or whatever it is that they think, they always come off like they are absolutely certain. And that's not how I'm trying to come across. What I'm trying to convey to you, though, is how interesting this really is. Going on, the number of the beast is 666 because it demonstrates refusal of the Judaizers and unbelievers to leave their works, their circumcision, their temple sacrificial system, and their feasts behind in order to enter into the Sabbath rest of Christ. So I'm just going to end with this passage that she wrote about the sea beast. So who is the sea beast of Revelation? By examining the Old Testament, a case can be made that the symbology of Revelation 13 and 14 clearly point to Israel as this beast. The beast rising out of the earth works in conjunction with the first, or the sea beast, and that's from Revelation 13:11-18. So let's actually go there and read that. And we already read some of this a couple of times today, but that's okay. Revelation 13:11-18. Then I saw another beast rising out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon. It exercises all the authority of the first beast in its presence, and makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose mortal wound was healed. It performs great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth in front of people. And by the signs that it is allowed to work in the presence of the beast, it deceives those who dwell on earth, telling them to make an image for the beast that was wounded by the sword and yet lived. And it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast might even speak and might cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. Also it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the one who is understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, or mankind, do not forget, and his number is 666. So Rome never collaborated with Israel during the 42-month-long Jewish revolt. It was by definition a revolt against Rome, not a collaboration with Rome. It is important to understand that these two beasts are of the same mind and work together. They are both Jewish. And I have to say that, I believed that Rome was also the sea beast. I've even said that in videos that I believe that Rome was the sea beast, especially because the sea is associated with the Gentiles. What is very, very interesting, though, and that she does not have in this excerpt, but I was talking to her about this, is that the 10 northern tribes of Israel, they were associated with the Gentiles. They were considered Gentiles because they had been divorced. So we had Benjamin and Judah, but then we had the 10 northern tribes. And they were not at that point considered to be part of Israel. They were considered to be Gentiles. So again, there still is that correlation with the sea and Gentiles. And another interesting thing on Nebuchadnezzar's statue, the 10 toes of the statue, there were 10 of the northern tribes. So another topic for another day. I just, wanted to bring that up. Now I'm going to finish up with one more paragraph. Yeah, like I said, I tried to paraphrase, and it's very hard to paraphrase because she said everything so succinctly. So I'm just going to get this in now before I read this last paragraph from her. If you have not subscribed to her channel, you need to do that. She has a way with words, and she is just so humble, and her videos are so clear. And as you can tell from what I've been sharing with you today, she is extremely intelligent. So anyway, that's just my little ad for her, which she doesn't even know is coming because, again, she is very humble. She even told me that I didn't even need to give her credit for this. But of course, I'm going to give her credit because she is the one who put this work in. And I'm just sharing it with you. Anyway, last paragraph, not the last paragraph of her paper, but the last paragraph that I'm going to share with you today. The book of Revelation is not just a clash of kingdoms, it is a clash of covenants. There was only one nation that was in a covenantal clash with the saints. Jesus said, "Therefore I tell you, the kingdom of God will be taken from you," speaking to the chief priests and Pharisees, "and given to a people producing its fruits." The kingdom wasn't taken from Rome. It wasn't taken from Nero. Nero died in 68 AD, before the war was over and prior to the siege of Jerusalem. Rome came out victorious and stronger than ever after the war with Israel. No, the book of Revelation is not a story of the Jewish war with Rome, but rather a vivid portrayal of Israel's battle against the saints and the kingdom of Christ, a battle between the old covenant of the law and the new covenant of the Spirit. So, one last thing now that I just wanted to say, this actually tied up so many things for me, because when I would speak about Revelation 20 and the Gog and Magog and fire coming down and devouring them, that always did bother me because it wasn't the Romans that fire came down and devoured. It was the Jews that fire came down and devoured. So looking at it from this perspective really does make a lot of sense for me. So those are my thoughts. I mean, what I just said now, most of the thoughts of what I just read are Kristen's, like I said. But my thoughts, though, are that this really does seem to make a lot of sense. And, I just wanted to share it with you. It's certainly something to pray about, something to consider, nothing to be dogmatic about. But all this to say, the mark of the beast is not in our future. And no, I'm not going to cause anybody to get anything. So just had to get that in because I'm sorry, that was ridiculous. But anyway, if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one down below. And if you like my work and would like to become a channel member, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well, or you can just click on it or on my channel page. Also want to add, I will have Kristen's links in my description box as well. Make sure you go over there, give her a subscribe, watch her videos. Anyway, I hope you have a great day.